So, you might say my present status is little unfavorable.
Reactor online.
I'm currently in the middle of a war zone on some godforsaken shithole with an atmosphere made up at least 30% of corrosive dust. And despite the fact nobody can see their own fucking feet out here, the incoming artillery seems to be getting closer.
Sensors online.
The fact I'm sitting at the controls of one of the deadliest war machines ever devised by man is somewhat mitigated by the fact the enemy resistance is anything but the sporadic our employers said it would be. This is my third sortie in just as many days. The only thing still keeping me going is my breakfast, made up of some pills I found in the seat cushions.
Weapons online.
8 tons of armor formerly attached to my mech is currently molten slag, courtesy of the last ambush we waded right into. The heat management is shut bad enough I could cook an egg on my hut. The ammo feed for the autocannon is out, too. It'll probably ignite after the next hit. I suspect the rest of my lance isn't faring much better.
All systems nominal.
Reactor's still purring like a kitten, though, so let's make some fucking money. Hi, my name is Lager, and MechWarrior 5 is a simulator of the life of a mech pilot in the 31st century. War has changed since the wee years of mechanized formations crashing into one another back on Mother Terra. That is, except in all the ways that matter. Colonizing hundreds of worlds, the human race first reached new technological heights, then proceeded to regress to neo-feudalism as the lack of FTL communications took its toll, and then steadily unified under the ever more powerful Great Houses. They coexisted in peace once, but the golden age of Starleak uniting most of humanity under a single Leviathan superstate is about 3 centuries dead. And the nobility we oh so wisely reinvented has been busy strategically allocating warheads on foreheads in a successive series of chair-related disagreements ever since. Systematically nuking things just to deny them to the enemy first took away quality of life, then moral boundaries, then some of the oldest human population centers, then the shipyards necessary to operate and maintain combat fleets, and finally left the inner sphere divided between a few enormously powerful noble houses who command vast but strategically gimped militaries, and one jumped up telecom company that's barely maintained its neutral position by being willing to read everyone's mail, running the only remaining universal bank, manipulating any and all information the rest of the inner sphere receives, and shooting everyone who figures out they're doing all of that in the head. The technological base has declined sharply, and what we today understand as a rare phenomenon that almost happened once has gotten a name. Lost Tech. With warships impossible to maintain or operate, modern war is once again decided in the dirt. And that battle space has had a champion since before the Golden Age was but a dream. Between artificial Myomer, portable fusion reactors, neural links, a couple centuries of advancements in materials technology, and a neat fact about the maximum compression of mud, the BattleMech has surpassed the tank as the ruler of the modern battlefield. The common issues with actual mechs have been solved long ago, and therefore people step into war zones in machines that can trace their spare parts at least 3 centuries back. The pilots of these metal monstrosities are the Knights of the New Age, often single-handedly determining the fates of entire wars in battles against fellow mech warriors. In other words, it's the perfect time to be a mercenary. If you have your own dropship, a couple battle mechs, and the will to drive them into whatever conflict the House Lords cooked up today with no regards for loyalty or morals, you could be very wealthy tomorrow. With even the lightest mechs offering enough firepower to level companies worth of regular armored vehicles and commonly capable of running near indefinitely, there is always demand. Saddling up to explain to some backwater planets militia that they do not get to secede from whatever government has chosen to tax them for a paycheck is, after all, a time-honored tradition. The world of Battletech is enormous and storied in a way only a long-running franchise can be. And what's more, the franchise in question is a tabletop game from the 80s. The big stumpy mechs are just a hook. The insanity of the universe is enormous enough to get lost in, and the art has undergone an evolution from accidental copyright infringement and cocaine in the water fountain comic book illustrations of the 80s into a much rougher and more industrial view on mech warfare. But the mechs have been a draw since the start, and simulating the experience of being in the cockpit of one has been a thing since before video games left the arcades. MechWarrior 5 should just be the latest in that pile, except nothing is that simple when it comes to the BattleTech franchise. Two separate standalone games developed by Piranha Games titled MechWarrior 5 exist. The one I'm talking about today, Mercenaries, is a sandbox of the Inner Sphere mercenary experience, spanning the turbulent time period from 3015 all the way to 3057 through multiple DLCs. The newer one, Clans, is far closer to the early 2000s titles everyone's nostalgic for, with the open-ended nature of randomized maps and contracts replaced by a story campaign. Both play roughly the same, both are co-op mech combat sims about building out your war machines and then ruining them in glorious combat, and both continue to receive updates and DLC. Though Unreal 4 is beginning to show its age, and Clans is a definite improvement on the visuals of BattleTech as a whole, Mercenaries is a pretty good representation of the 31st century battlefield, and the art direction brought by the franchise helps tremendously. Mechs are the things you'll be looking at most often, and therefore hog the art team's efforts, leaving everything else with a noticeable lack of detail. But the large variety of biomes serves to compensate somewhat. To cover that issue up, the game chooses to embrace both weather and weapons effects to their maximum, entirely willing to blind you when under sustained fire or marching through a snowstorm. There are some performance issues pertaining to this, though they're much less prevalent now than at launch, and the whole thing is obviously CPU bound to hell and back. But that's the price paid for hitboxes this good and destruction models this variable. And the mechs look truly excellent. The sound is a little more of a mixed bag. Heavy metal has always been the music of choice for this series, but the best tracks came way later with the DLC, meaning the true standouts play rarely. What's far more memorable is the sound effects. MechWarrior is trying to put you in the cockpit, and that means you have to hear all the sounds the machine makes. From the constant hum of the reactor and rhythmic crunching of underfoot infantry to the impacts of weapons fire on your machine. Even the sound of having your mech ripped apart from under you is executed perfectly, though the actual weapons fire depends on what you're shooting. Lasers just tend to sort of buzz, which is a little underwhelming compared to emptying an ultra-autocam ammo bin into something, or launching an entire volley of missiles. But really, that's to be expected. I mean, if a gun doesn't have recoil, why the fuck are you even mounting it?
Ammo level critical.
Ah, right. Both of the MechWarrior 5 games take their core gameplay loop from a third game developed by Piranha, MechWarrior Online, which is a decade-and-a-half-old free-to-play game that refuses to die despite being famous for having endless technical issues. It's the series' designated PvP component, and that's all the mention it gets before I go off on a tangent about how much of a practical lesson in where the entire industry went wrong it is. Since that early time, though, the formula has been the same. Supported by either AI or 3 equally bloodthirsty friends, you first sit down and appease the Tylenol-afflicted part of your brain by managing the company's status and spending serious time, not to mention a small fortune, kitting out the mechs. Then you appease the part that you were dropped on as a child by driving that meticulously designed God of War directly into a back-alley knife fight against another crazy motherfucker until someone gets turned into mist. Provided it's not you, you get to rake in the payout, and that means you get to do it all again, assuming you didn't ruin your own ride hard enough to run out of money trying to put it back together. Doing either of those things is not particularly easy, but the piloting is definitely a tad more stressful, what with all the supersonic projectiles and energy discharges flying about. Battlemechs are enormous machines that take serious skill to understand and control properly, not merely extensions of the pilot's body. Driving one is a lot more like driving a tank than you might initially expect, and not just because they run on tank controls. With weight anywhere between 20 and 100 metric tons of fuck you, and speeds often in excess of 60 clicks an hour, there can be serious inertia to account for, and being run over is always a valid concern in a war zone. Some mechs even mount jump jets, so not even a sheer cliff is a guarantee they can't follow you, or land directly on your head. As all damage is locational, taking a foot to the head, which is usually also the cockpit housing, can be quite difficult to recover from, both physically and emotionally. Each location on a mech houses components, and whether they're weapons, cooling systems, ammunition, or electronics, when you get that part blown off, they're going to go with it. In that case, merely losing them is a relatively good outcome. The ammunition could just as easily have cooked off and taken most of the mech with it in a short-lived funeral pyre visible from orbit. Some designs understand damage is inevitable and forego placing important bits where they could get shut off, or even designate particular body parts as sacrificial. A mech missing an arm or its leg can still continue its mission, after all, even if it means moving at half the speed or being short on weapons. Losing both legs will kill you, though. That's one of the more favorable ways to disable a mech. It's not fast by any stretch, and since legs mount no weapon, the enemy will be returning fire full force the whole time, but it has one important advantage. It leaves a more or less intact mech to salvage. Splitting the center torso wide open to crack the reactor inside won't do that, never mind the fact it might result in said reactor going critical, but it is much faster. Landing a couple good shots at the cockpit glass and mulching the MechWarrior inside is quicker still, and clean to boot, but a shot like that is a difficult feat at the best of times, and the fact both you and your target are likely going to be moving around and twisting your torsos to spread incoming fire across as many armor plates as possible will not be making that easier. And that's nothing to say of where your weapons end up mounted. Arms are further out and swing independently of the torso, meaning their larger firing arcs let you track targets easier, but they're also much more exposed and typically don't have as much armor. Losing them would disable the mech at least, and they are easier to find spares for, though any attached weapon system will be gone pending an overhaul. Weapons mounted to the torso tend to enjoy better protection, unless you happen to take an alpha strike to the rear arc, but they can't aim high or low very well. For some, like long-range guided missiles, physical location won't matter very much, but large autocannons with significant ballistics might end up being unwieldy when used at close range from a housing halfway down the mech's torso. Mechs can mount a variety of weapons, depending on the pilot's personal brand of insanity and the machine's intended operations tempo. There is only one factor they all have in common, the occasional Achilles heel of mech design: heat. With enormous engines and weaponry, getting rid of all the heat produced by weapons fire, moving around, or simply deciding to take a swim in something that you really shouldn't have can be a difficult ordeal. Face rolling the controls can cause your mech to shut down, too, leaving you exposed to enemy fire while you run the restart sequence. That is, unless you choose to live and die by the heat safety override, melting your own machine's coolant lines down to get another round of laser shots out. They're still more efficient than anything else anyone's come up with, but the occasional cost and design drawbacks have kept the combined in combined arms. Despite being in the cockpit of a 100-ton war machine, you're always right to be worried about some asshole firing large chunks of their ammunition budget at you from over the horizon, an aircraft choosing an inopportune moment to strafe you, or a tank crew trying to be big damn heroes. Nuclear weapons are the occasional exclamation points sufficiently equipped militaries insert after a battle, and with the scale of warfare steadily growing galactic, places like Old Kentucky got to experience the sun in previously unimaginable formats. Just about the only thing you don't have to worry about is infantry, mostly because attacking a mech on foot is an act that requires a whole lot of sheer fucking crazy. So many things out there will attempt to kill you in ever more inventive ways, it's simply mandatory to prepare the machine you intend to ride to Ragnarok's doorstep for the absolute worst. War, as is tradition, begins at the drawing board, and in the context of mech warfare, that drawing board is the mech lab. The raw chassis is just the beginning. Though it defines top speed, weight limits, and the hard points for weapons, what you mount and where is primarily a question of funding and personal sobriety. With more per ton carry capacity than anything else in the known galaxy, any weapon system is fair game on a mech, from tank-sized autocannons and lasers to missile shotguns and genuine, actual swords. Every weapon has its own upsides and downsides, whether it's the amazingly efficient but ammo-hungry autocannons and missile launchers, the short ranges and large damage potentials of compact weapons, the need to maintain a sensor lock with guided weaponry offsetting the ability to fire without a visual, or the immense heat generated by energy weapons that needs to be offset by heat sinks being the trade-off to pinpoint damage. There is even an entire family of weapons whose sole purpose is to coat mechs in napalm, keeping them from cooling down and potentially even triggering their heat safeties. The bigger a weapon is, however, the more it's going to weigh, and weight is one of the core limitations of every mech chassis. Every point of armor, every weapon or tool, and every bit of ammunition weighs something, meaning you'll have to carefully balance out what you actually want out of your machine. Lighter mechs are faster and might actually dodge some of the incoming fire, but they simply don't have the carrying capacity to mount the kind of armor and weaponry needed to go toe-to-toe with something larger. Even if that scarcely stops them, because Locust pilots are never particularly sane. even by MechWarrior standards. The weapons mechs mount can either be rounded out to handle a variety of threats, or they can be meant to handle one particular type of job. Reconnaissance, sniping, artillery work, flanking, or battlefield command, even fisticuffs. If you can name it, the Inner Sphere has built a mech to do it, and then driven enough of them to their doom that everyone else has claimed a specimen as battlefield salvage. 3 centuries of warfare have pared the list of designs you might encounter out in the wild down significantly, but that still leaves some 80 different chassis and over 400 total available configurations, some of which may even include valuable lost stack or arena modifications, brought about by the inordinate amount of Canopa's battle powder most Solaris jockeys consume. Many of the most dangerous tools are lost stack too, and obtaining them can be next to impossible. Few pieces remain on the market, and none of them legally, meaning you'll be paying exorbitant fees for them in shady underworld dens, or praying they survive the countless hits you need to bring them and their bearers down so you could claim them as salvage, only to end up praying some more as you bring them out onto a battlefield where everything will be trying to rip them off you. The effort is worth it though, as the Starlink Defense Force really did build their equipment different. Pulse lasers are an entire generation ahead of their regular versions. LBX autocannons are essentially mech-scale shotguns with a hippity-hoppity get-off-my-property to match, and that's nothing compared to the venerable Gauss rifle, which can confidently take a mech's head off at about 2 kilometers, provided you can land that shot. Even the heatsinks from back then are valuable finds, larger but much more weight efficient than contemporary ones. But without a machine to mount them to, they're just expensive paperweights. To name just a few, the aforementioned Locust is a 20-ton chicken-legged piece of shit, which has exactly 2 claims to fame. It runs faster than whatever you're chasing it with, and even if you shoot it dead, there are enough factories making them and crazies willing to get into them you've barely inconvenienced your opposition. But if you ignore it instead, it'll come out of the least convenient spot imaginable to put a shot in your rear arc before running away. An assault mech like the King Crap won't do that. It moves too slow to sneak up on anyone, but that's because it doesn't have to. If you see one crossing the horizon, that's your 3-second warning to get the fuck out of its firing arc. A Canik's Crap can core entire mechs in a majestic double tap, pulping their internals with 2 of the largest autocannons ever built, while casually shrugging off any return fire. It's frankly quite a cozy experience to pilot. You just sit there, laugh as you delete entire enemy lances, and then promptly get very sad when you realize you've run out of ammo. The almighty AC-20 is so incredible, entire mechs are designed around its use. The Hunchback is an old classic, striking a good balance of armor and speed to close in and ruin something much bigger than itself with the few shots it has. But the true fan favorite is the UrbanMech, because it's a trash can, not trash cannot. An UrbanMech has 2 speeds, slow and stationary, but it's the lightest mech to mount the biggest gun in the Inner Sphere, and on its home turf, the narrow streets of cities, it can safely deliver a rather unexpected dose of death from any back alley. The opposite end of the spectrum involves mechs who fill the nebulous fire support role. Machines that fire around corners and over hills to inconvenience you or outright kill you without ever showing up on sensors. The Catapult is a common sight, with its launcher arms being essentially boxes, and therefore comparatively simple to refit into whatever the fuck the designers were smoking with the K2 variant. But it's really heavier beasts like the Archer and Longbow you ought to be on the lookout for. The other mechs have to at least see you to shoot you, whether it's the Workhorse Centurion, Rocket Shotgun Kintaro, Phoenix Hawk delivering another Ballerina Light show, or the Marauder. Praise be his name, forever may he reign, and fuck your cockpit from over this rock. Wait, what the fuck is that? Any single one of these machines would be incredibly expensive to operate or upgrade on its own, and with 4 being dropped at once and sometimes no chance to effect repairs between missions, more often than not you'll end up operating 2 or 3 Ready Lances at once, on top of paying the salaries of their pilots. The only way to stay afloat in the Inner Sphere economy is therefore to take regular jobs. Whoever they're for. Bigger jobs pay better, but to get them, you need the employer to believe they're getting their money's worth, which is where reputation comes into play. The Mercenary Review Board will certify you and handle disputes, sure, but the great houses prefer to work with people who've been in their employ a solid while without shooting at them, and will incentivize you with sales and extra pay to keep working for them exclusively. That's a trap though, sometimes literally. None of your employees should be trusted, even if the Canopa's cocaine payouts are quite generous, especially the 5 successor states, because none of them will hesitate to disavow you when you get captured. The Feddies will smugly claim they're killing all these people for the good of the Inner Sphere. The Lyrans will be too busy appointing socialites as commanders to care about your survival chances. The Free Worlds League might not pay you because they're in yet another civil war. And the Draconis Combine's a little, well... At least they're not the Capellans, though. Capellans not only pay substandard rates and are the cause of every ill that plagues mankind, real or imagined, those motherfuckers also stab people in the back constantly. Killing Capellans is practically a moral obligation. If you get the chance to mortar a Capellan orphanage, you should take it. It's a mercy to everyone involved, including yourself. During your career, you'll end up working and traveling through countless territories, tipping the ever-shifting balance of power one way or the other, and getting rich off the salvage. The base campaign is just a start. Over the course of the game's post-launch development, there have been entire campaigns added through the DLC. Mech Arena combat, added with Solaris Showdown, is just one part of that. What begins as a jaunt hunting for a payout large enough to get out of debt, might therefore take you all the way to being tapped to participate in major military operations as a contractor, taking out priority objectives and campaigns to take entire planetary systems. These campaign missions offer a different kind of challenge than their regular, randomly generated maps, with multiple drops in short sequence forcing you to press less optimal, but undamaged designs into service, and unique maps posing a whole host of new problems. Each of them is worth it in turn, at least on sale, if only because Legend of the Kestrel Lancers has you kill a lot of Capellans, and Dragon's Gambit is the first time in the entire setting I could work for the Draconis Combine for 10 continuous minutes without gagging. Shadow of Kerensky even introduces one of the grandest events of the whole timeline, offering you a chance to fight the oncoming storm of invaders from beyond the sphere, and eventually beating their honorable ways and technological superiority back with the power of such Desgra evils as logistics and attritable assets. Not all the good extras are behind a paywall, either. This thing runs on Unreal 4, and that means people have been modding the ever-loving hell out of it for the past 5 years. The base game's got plenty of content, but with a couple mods, you have the option to improve on basically all of it. Updating the star map, changing how certain units work, even improving on the AI or adding mission types. By far the most impressive is the Yet Another Mech Lab series of mods, which turns the Mech Lab from its somewhat simplified state in the base game to more closely resemble the sheer variety available when building mechs for the tabletop. The sheer creative potential warrants a playthrough all of its own. A playthrough you get to further customize by introducing entire submods worth of additional mechs, variants, and modules to mount. The bottom line is this: MechWarrior 5 is absolutely worth your time, if not your money. The DLCs are expensive, unofficial mods are the thing that really makes it pop. It took Piranha literal years to unfuck their shit and get melee combat into the game, or get it onto a platform that isn't the Fortnite launcher, and it still doesn't matter, because this is going to remain the go-to MechWarrior experience for years to come. The times of getting into pods in an arcade to get your fill of driving a mech are long past. Now you get to do it at home with a VR headset and a HOTAS setup you had to jury-rig using a pile of mods. And for your trouble, you get to ride to Valhalla, shiny and chrome, grinning like a madman, and salivating over the salvage clause in your contract as you explain to some kleiner asshole that the Inner Sphere is absolutely capable of killing their gene-engineered ass regardless of how many tens of millions of C-bills their battlemech would go for on the black market. The core of the experience is the teeth-rattling rumble of 105mm rounds impacting against the plating of your pimped-out ride as you lock the offending Capellan with your battle computer and scream at your friends piloting the other mechs in the lands to hop into action, juggling the 50 readouts, screaming overheat and sensor lock warnings at you without a care in the world, tearing a 100-ton machine limb from limb. Other people can do the reasoning on why you're here and what you're fighting for. You don't have to give a fuck. You're in a battle mech, and whatever the employer asks, you deliver. Well, just as long as the check's clear.